of rock under it, and exerted all our strength. The slab moved upward an inch or two, grating in its rough grooves. The crack, no higher than the diameter of the crowbar plus a stone or two when we first saw it, was now twice its original height. In went another stone, and so on. We worked like demons in hell, and in an atmosphere almost as hot and breathless. Yet we could breathe. Whether all the air we got came through the long twisting passage Corkran had made, or whether there were ventilation from the other side of the rock curtain, some opening in an unseen cave, we could not tell. All we knew was that the mountain had a secret, and that the man who had tried to rob us of our rights to it was caught in the trap of the djinns. Our rights! How fragile as spider webs, how almost laughable they seemed down here! Rights we had bargained for with men, which they, not owning them, had gravely given. I suddenly realized, and I think Anthony realized, as sweating and silent we piled up the fulcrum of stone thrown down by the djinns, that they alone, or the sleeping queen they guarded, had rights in this hidden place. When we had raised the slab to a height of about 2 feet in its grooves, and had made sure that the stones held it firmly in place, we told each other that it was time to cross the threshold. The rock door was scarcely more than a yard in width, and we crawled through in single file, Anthony going ahead as before with his torch. I passed my lantern in after him, and then followed. As I crept through the narrow aperture I was conscious, among other emotions, of vague disappointment. If this is the way to a tomb, and the only way, there can't be anything very fine to discover, I said to myself. Why, the entrance isn't big enough to let in a decent-sized sarcophagus. It's the man of my dreams all right, and he's lying close to a deep-set doorway, like the one where I've seen him so often. I told you so, Anthony was saying in quite a commonplace voice, as I picked myself up on the other side of the rock screen. We were in a small chamber, more roughly hewn, and not so large as the inner sanctuary of Abu Simbel, which I had such good cause to remember. Exactly opposite the entrance by which we had come in was, as Anthony had said, a door, deeply set in the rock, a door of the same type as that through which we had passed, and in the shadow of the overhanging arch lay the heavy figure of Colonel Corkran, dressed in khaki. His eyes were open, but he did not stir as we bent over him. Only his lips moved slightly, as if he were making a grimace. "He's trying to ask for something to eat or drink," said Fenton. "What a confounded fool I am! I've nothing, not even a flask. Have you?" "No, I'll go back at once and get something," I answered. Strange, but I was not in the least angry with Corkran, whom I had been execrating. Perhaps this was partly because the impression that the djinns had sole rights here was growing stronger every moment. We were all interlopers, usurpers. Without stopping for more words, I turned my back to the secret still unsolved. To my surprise, however, I saw a light, stronger than our own, shining outside the partly raised screen of rock. Getting on my knees to crawl out, my face almost met the face of Monny Gilder, about to crawl in. Involuntarily I gave way, and in she crept like a big baby, Biddy coming after. Then we laughed, though I had seldom felt less like laughing. And the echo of our laughter was as if the spirits laughed behind our backs. "We never promised we wouldn't come," Monny hastily began, before Anthony could speak. "We just kept still. And Sir Marcus thought you wouldn't much mind, because the 2 nicest Nubians brought us quite safely. Oh, isn't it wonderful? And to be here when you opened that door! But why, it isn't one of our men with you. It's the thief." "Don't call him names now, dearest," Brigit begged. "Poor wretch, he looks nearly dead. What a good thing we brought the biscuits and brandy." "I was going for some," I said. Not only had I got to my feet again, but had helped Biddy to hers, and Anthony had snatched his tall Monny up as if she had been a bundle of thistledown. The angels! It would never have done to tell them how glad we were that they had disobeyed us. It was Providence, apparently, not Marcus Lark, who had sent them to the rescue. "We thought perhaps if you found anything interesting you'd want to stay with it a long time," explained Monny. "That's why we brought you food and drink. It's a good thing we came, isn't it?" Fenton and I did not answer. Indeed, we occupied ourselves with ministering to the enemy, a few bits of crumbled biscuit, a few drops of brandy to moisten them. He mumbled and swallowed and choked, and slowly the veinous red came back to the flabby grey cheeks, with their prickles of sprouting beard. "It's fresh air he needs now," said Anthony. "He won't die from 2 or 3 days fasting, not he. And it can't be more, for it would have taken him days and nights of hard work to get here, after his men were sent off. Jove! I believe it's more funk than anything else that's laid him low. Thought he was done for and all that. Look, there's his candle lantern upset on the floor. It couldn't have been very gay for him when the light went out. Lend a hand, Duffer, and we'll give him to the Nubians the girls have brought. They'll carry him to his own tent. He never got as far as the second door here, so we needn't search him. Otherwise I would, like a shot." Yes, it was something higher than a mere financier who sent the girls to us in the antechamber of the secret. We could not, for their own sakes, have risked bringing them. But here they were, and we should always have this memory together, we told ourselves, though we did not tell the disobedient ones. That would have been a bad precedent. What there was to see, they would see with us, and even the jinns could not work harm to angels. We went out and collected more stones with which to prop up the second screen of rock, which was not so thick as the first, and used Corcoran's spade to hold it up at last. Beyond was another roughly hewn chamber, and at the far end, set in a curiously fitted frame of wood, a wooden door, looking almost as new as though it had been made yesterday. Anthony flashed his electric torch over it, and we saw the grain of deal. There was a bronze lock, and a latch of strange, crude workmanship which Monny touched deprecatingly. "May I?" she half whispered. For to her also the place was haunted. She seemed to ask permission of spirits rather than of her lover. But the latch did not move. "It would be sacrilege to break the lock," she said. "What shall you do?" "Take the door off its supports. They're not hinges," Fenton answered, in the queer, low tone which somehow we all instinctively adopted. "We've got 1 or 2 implements that may help to do the trick." He worked cautiously, even tenderly, for this Queen's secret was our secret in the finding, even if the right to it was in the keeping of the jinns. Monny held my lantern, and it was a good half hour before Anthony and I together could carefully lift the deal door, unbroken, from its place. Still Monny held the lantern, and at the threshold of a dimly seen room beyond, we all drew back, for on the sanded floor were footprints. To them the girl pointed, her eyes turning to Anthony's face, as if to ask, "How can it be that anyone came in, when the door was locked, and there was that screen of rock to raise?" But as we looked, over one another's shoulders, we realized that the prints were not made by modern boots. They were the marks of sandals, and they went across the floor to a thing that glittered in the middle of the room, a vague shape like a draped coffin, with something high and pointed on top, crossed to a glittering table on which a ray from the lantern revealed offerings to the dead, a loaf, a roasted duck, its wings neatly tied with string, cakes and fruit, all dried and blackened, but perfect in form, and a saucer of incense, from which a little ash had fallen from a ghostly pastille onto the table. There the sandalled feet had paused, while the incense caught a spark, and moving on had walked straight to the door. A faint fragrance from perfume jars came to our nostrils, a strange, subtle fragrance still, though most of its sweetness had gone, leaving more marked the smell of fat which had held the perfume all these years, while civilizations grew up and perished. The man who had lit the incense and locked the door seemed to have hurried back from who knew where, to stand behind us, saying, "I forbid you entrance, in the name of the ancient gods!" We could not see him, nor hear his voice, but we could feel that he was there, and something in us revolted against the ruthlessness of disobeying, of forcing our way into the room in spite of him, to crush his footprints with ours. "Why does the sand glitter so?" Monny asked. "Everything glitters. Everything looks as if it were made of gold." "The mountain of the golden pyramid," Biddy murmured. "Go in, first, you two, and bless the place," I said, my heart wildly beating. They obeyed for once, moving delicately as if to music which ears of men were not fine enough to hear. They went hand in hand, and as Monny, in her straight, pale-tinted dress, held up the lantern, I thought of the wise Virgin. When this room had last been lighted, the parable of the Virgins of the Lamps was yet unspoken. "It is not sand," said Monny, gasping a little in the heavy air. "It is sprinkled gold dust. Now it is on the soles of our feet. It shines! It shines!" Anthony and I followed, still with that curious sense of hesitation, as if we ought to apologize to some one. The room of the dead was very close, and we drew our breath with difficulty for a moment. But the discomfort passed. Mechanically we avoided